So when I was growing up in India, I was always told that India is a developing country. And it became very obvious when I moved to the UK, started living in a small village called Kidlington, 4 miles from Oxford. And for the first time, I understood what it meant when somebody said India is a developing country. For the first time, I was experiencing what that developed state looked like. And it didn't take long for me to understand how much long would it take for India to reach that developed state. And I couldn't help ask myself this question: how many lifetimes would it take for India to become a developed country? And then I also made a promise to myself. I gave myself 2 years and said I would come back to India and start something in the social space. If you come from a country like India, you're spoiled for choice. You can pick up any issue, any social issue, and dedicate your life in solving it. And the year was 2006. Looked at several ideas, right from child labor to rural employment, to creating awareness about the problems which India faces for Indians living in India. And then finally, microcredit, because the Grameen Bank and Mohammad Yunus had won the Nobel Peace Prize. We were as excited as anybody else. And our initial response was, well, Bangladesh is a poor country. India is better off. We don't need microcredit. But a little bit of Googling led us to an article which spoke about how borrowers who had borrowed from a microfinance institution in Hyderabad, some of them had committed suicide. That was a grim article. This was way back in 2004, and I was reading this article in 2006. The article went on to say that the district collector of Hyderabad passed an order that all the borrowers who had borrowed from this microfinance institution need not pay them back. So there was a big hue and cry. The thought leaders in the space came rushing to him and said, well, this is a sunrise industry. You can't pass this order. The district collector said, well, I understand what Mohammad Yunus is doing in Bangladesh, but your interest rates of 50% plus, this is not microcredit. You need to go back and think about it. Despite the order, the borrowers went ahead and repaid the loans for the fear that they would not get any further loans. And that caught our attention. We said, can we do something about it? And that is when we set up Rangde, India's first internet-based peer-to-peer, low-cost platform to provide funding for low-income entrepreneurs across the country. Well, she's the other co-founder. We're also related. She's my wife. And the inspiration behind the name Rangde came from our freedom struggle, where it was not about just giving time, it was not just about giving money, but it was giving a bit more than that, giving yourself. And that's how we decided to come up with this name and the initiative. So we got lucky. When we decided to move back to India, we found support in the form of 20 million rupees, which was generously given to us by a large foundation in India. And we were extremely lucky because they believed not just in the idea, but they believed in us. And in the last 6 years, we've grown this money and we have funded loans to the tune of 210 million rupees. And these were the number of loans we disbursed, out of which 95% of them were women entrepreneurs. And we funded 282 different business activities. And this is the default rate. But this doesn't come as a surprise because the poor in India, if they value anything at all, it is a self-esteem. And here is one example, of Saraswati Devi, one of our entrepreneurs, who was given a loan of 8,000 rupees and trained on entrepreneurship. She was so excited about the entrepreneurship that she went on to become a role model and she became a mentor for 100 entrepreneurs in her community, which led her to win the Anita Sen Memorial Award from the state government of Jharkhand. This is a quick snapshot of where India really is. 7.7% of India's population has access to credit. We still have a long way to go. And about a year ago, we were looking at raising more capital for scaling Rangde. And that is when we started to realize how difficult that was. We reached out to the non-profit foundations. We said, well, can you help us? And one of the foundations which I reached out, I told them, well, I have a business plan, and this is the scale-up plan. This is for the next 5 years. And the person said, well, I understand you have a business plan. Please don't waste your time. Just reach out to us when we open the funding period, and you would get some funds. And he also asked me whether this was the first time I was applying to the foundation, and I said yes. And then I reached out to another foundation. And this was a family foundation where they wanted to give away their wealth. I told them, this is what we do. They said, yes, we have heard about you, great work. Let's talk about it. And I asked them if I could get funded, and they said yes. And then I couldn't help but ask them if they really cared about the work which I did. And they said, well, we're actually looking at funding a few nonprofits. And then I asked her a question, whether the family which was willing to give away the money really valued the money which they were willing to give away. And she looked at me, gave me a long look, there was a long pause, and then she said, no. And I wondered if that money would create any value for anybody. This is largely the two conclusions which I was forced to draw upon. Philanthropic capital funds projects and not organizational growth. And donors give what they think is right and not what the cause needs. And no surprise that the impact growth, if you were to map for the nonprofits in India, it would look something like this. It's directly related to the amount of funding they receive, and they get to keep a small percentage to cover their overheads. And what you get as a result is bonsai nonprofits. It's bonsai not because of the founder's dream or ambition, it's because of the ecosystem they're part of. In India, we have 2 million nonprofits. To just give you a sense of what that means, one nonprofit for every 600 Indians. And we still have social issues which, still the country grapples with. Then we looked at the for-profit route. I reached out to an impact investment forum, reached out to an impact investor. I told them that we are a nonprofit. And would he be interested in investing in the company? And we told them, because we're a nonprofit, we would not be able to give any dividends. He gave me a hard look and he asked me whether I had an MBA. And I said, well, no. I said, well, that explains. So had you had an MBA, you would have known that a non-dividend paying company has zero market valuation. And then that got me thinking. So what effectively the message was that regardless of the team, regardless of the human capital you have, your valuation would always be zero. And then I couldn't help think of a fellow social entrepreneur who's chosen the for-profit route. Now I remember him telling me one day, in their board meetings, the only conversations they have are about profit, profitability, and revenue. And that's because for the social entrepreneur, impact comes first. And for the impact investor, the financial returns come first. And to an extent, where the social entrepreneur was actually getting existential questions. Why did I start the social enterprise at all? Because all he gets is every day a call from his investor, how many units have you sold? How profitable are we today? And then this whole notion about fortune at the base of the pyramid. It's a fantastic notion, provided you're willing to sell shampoos, soaps. But then if you're really looking at creating value for the base of the pyramid, and But clearly, there's no fortune there. And this is important because very often, many businesses have been built with the whole notion that you can actually do good and do well at the same time. The other, sort of a myth is, well, the cookie cutter models work great for the social enterprise. This is so far from true. Great for McDonald's, but not for people living on $2 a day at the very base of the pyramid. In one geography, goat rearing could be very profitable, and the neighboring geography, cow rearing could be very profitable. So the cookie cutter models traditionally do not work. And one such business, which was about microcredit, and they applied the same cookie cutter model not too long ago. In 2010, we saw a crisis in the microfinance space. And what really happened was a borrower had 5 loans outstanding, which added up to $2,000. They had a loan to repay every day of the week, and the effective interest rate they paid varied from 35% to 45% APR. And finally, one day, 70 borrowers committed suicide. And one particular case, a borrower called Padma, she jumped into her own village well with her 2 children, 18-month-old son and 4-year-old daughter, to save herself from the humiliation she faced from the loan officers of the microfinance company, which was supposed to protect her interests. So unlike a traditional business in a social enterprise, people overlook the fact that if things go wrong, there's a huge social collateral the social enterprise pays. And as a whole, the whole entire community is responsible. Because for the people living at the base of the pyramid, they don't have choices. The only choice they have is the service which is offered to them at their doorstep. Then we finally looked at Muhammad Yunus for inspiration yet again. And he had a solution. He spoke passionately about a new kind of business called the social business, which has the best of both worlds. The scale of the for-profit and the doggedness of the non-profit. And we called it the social equity model. Essentially, the fundamental guiding principle of this model is it is a business with one bottom line. Just focus on one bottom line, one social issue, make it part of the DNA of your organization and go at tackling that problem. And also, it is a non-loss making. It's not a non-profit. It's a non-loss making company, a non-dividend paying company. What it does is it aligns the social investors in the business with that of the social entrepreneur, and all of them focus on solving just one problem. It's an impact-based valuation. The more the impact, the higher the valuation. And this is how a social equity investor might see his reports, unlike today, where they just track financial performance. And in spite of all this, this is where India stands today. 48% of India still is malnourished under the age of 5. 66% of India still doesn't have access to sanitation. 26% they still don't have immunization. We have a world record on this. We are the lowest when it comes to immunization, even behind Afghanistan. But then we have some great examples like Mahesh, who's a social entrepreneur, engineering graduate, just passed out of college. He's looking at addressing the problem of malnutrition by making candies out of spirulina and distributing them to school children in government schools. Then we have Chandrasekhar, who is ex-JP Morgan, has quit a well-paying job, is trying to give counseling services to students studying in government schools. And finally, I would you know, tell you a small story which I heard many, many years ago from someone who is no longer there. And he said, if you want to really solve a problem, then you should feel the problem to such an extent that you become one with the problem, and then you will start finding the solution. I hope that all the social entrepreneurs, all of us here, come together to make this place a better place. And personally, I would like to see my epitaph look something like this. Thank you very much.